cloven hoof. And he's covered in hair from his head to his toe. He's got the chains wrapped around him. He carries a switch or a stick or a broom-like thing. And over his back, he's got a scratchy burlap sack or a basket. And what Krampus does is he's coming for bad and naughty children. Krampus is not the enemy of Santa Claus. He's the cohort. If Santa's good cop and St. Nicholas is good cop, Krampus is bad cop. On December 5th, children had to be afraid, very afraid, because if Krampus comes for them, we're not talking about coal or sticks in your stocking. We're talking about being abducted, taken back to his lair, and eaten. That was the punishment for being naughty.
Well, and had that story been around when I was growing up, I would have wet the sheets. That's all I can tell you.
You definitely would have wet the sheets. If that was,
I mean, I had enough. You got enough stress worrying, like you said. You got enough stress worrying. Was I good enough? Could I have been better? Well, how close was Santa really paying attention? I mean, there's a lot of kids on this planet, and now you throw in this side of the story where you've got this creature. Now, did the legend and lore, did they have Santa aware of Krampus, Krampus aware of Santa, or were they two totally separate legends?
No, they work together. And here's the thing, there is so much artwork from the 1800s, old postcards and things like that. Most of them, Krampus is depicted alone doing his thing. But in a couple of them, you can actually see Krampus and St. Nicholas side by side. There's one that shows Krampus driving the car, and St. Nicholas is a passenger in the car. There's others where you see, they're standing next to each other, and Nicholas is handing out presents, and Krampus is looking over them like passing judgment. So Nicholas doesn't have to get his hands dirty, right? So if you survive
this takes on a mob motif, right? You have St. Nicholas, the Godfather, and then you've got his enforcer, Krampus, to kind of clear the way so that Santa can get to, or St. Nicholas can get to the good kids unimpeded.
That's exactly right. So you're a little kid in Germany, and you're going to bed that night, and they're telling you, beware of Krampus. And you're petrified. You're going to sleep, and you're absolutely scared out of your mind. And if you wake up the next day, number 6, I'm good. Good for a year. St. Nicholas is coming. I'm clearly on the nice list. There's no more wondering. There will be presents for me this year. So I guess there's comfort in that, but it's one horrid night of fear that's in store for you but beforehand. And, I thought about, too, when I was a kid, I remember being afraid, like we said earlier, could I have been better? Did I behave enough? And so on. But there was the fear of okay, I didn't really think I'd get coal or sticks in my stocking, but what if I didn't get any presents? What if my good family is getting all their presents and they're looking at me and just shaking their head saying, yep, you weren't good enough. So we did have these fears, but back in the 1800s, they were materialized in this figure, this really frightening figure. And there's so much, I invite everyone to get on Google and just Google Krampus. You'll see dozens and dozens of images from the 1800s that show this Christmas devil sometimes holding a pitchfork, torturing a child, lifting him up by the ears, stuffing a kid into bags, riding an old wooden horse, right behind the kid's looking all nervous, and here comes Krampus for him, and so forth.
Now, were there different levels of punishment that Krampus would dole out? If you were just kind of naughty, would you get the switch? Would you get hit with the sticks? If you were really naughty, you could drag back and eaten? Or was it when Krampus came for you, that was it?
In the original version, when Krampus came for you, that was it. Now, he changed and altered, and there were other figures that came along that were more apt to feed you than kill you, and we'll get to them very soon, I promise. But this Krampus figure, for the most part, in the beginning, you were doomed. There was no way out. You see Krampus coming, it's a one-way trip.
And you said this originated in Germany.
In Germany, Krampusnacht, December 5th.
So it was the night before St. Nicholas would come by and give out the gifts and reward the good. So, again, I joked about it being kind of a mob enforcer, but was that essentially the idea? Krampus would come along and remove all the bad children so that when St. Nicholas came the next day, he had a clearer path to just the good children to give them their gifts?
That's right. So St. Nicholas knew on December 6th, on his day, that he was, any kids around, must be good. He's free to bring them gifts and be the good guy because Krampus has done the dirty work. Krampus was not the enemy of St. Nicholas, the cohort, the co-worker, the partner, the dark side, the shadow of St. Nicholas, if you will.
Well, now, can I ask you this? We know Nicholas existed in one form.
Absolutely.
St. Nicholas. is there any corroboration that a character like Krampus existed? Obviously not some demonic force, but was there some kernel of truth to that legend in Germany?
What's interesting to me, Dave, and we'll get into this as well, there are other creatures that behave very similar and have even in the ballpark of description to Krampus in other countries that show up. And the idea is the same, that this creature, this preternatural creature, comes from somewhere to bring justice to bad kids, to get them in line, and often in lethal ways, because back then that was the culture. You didn't have to worry about not getting enough presents or whatever. You worried about literally death. And that was the way, one of the many ways they kept their children in line back then. So the devil-type creature that's administering justice, that goes back to the Bible. The devil
right.
is something for bad people. This was not a new idea. It's not me.
But thankfully, this wasn't a story predicated on the fact that at one point in history we would sacrifice children before the solstice or something, right? There was no legitimate case where children were being taken or murdered or horrific things being done to them as kind of a sacrificial, totem.
No, that's
okay.
Not necessarily. There were sacrifices, definitely animal sacrifices in like Saturnalia and Yule events, and maybe even human sacrifices, but not really descriptions of children being sacrificed. But winter could kill. Winter could kill everybody, old people, young people, and so forth. Winter could kill. And so one of the things that I think our ancient pagan ancestors did, they held this festival because they were also trying to appease their gods. Because to get through the winter, you don't just need enough food in your stores. You don't just need enough smarts and so forth. You're going to need a little bit of luck. You're going to need your gods on your side in order to get through this very difficult time of year. And so I imagine it would be very easy for people to, represent that howling, screeching wind outside as a figure that's coming for them, and that merging with devil legends and so forth over time, it gives rise to these figures. And also, too, you hibernate in the winter. You're worried about keeping your sanity. You know where you live in Minnesota there. You can get snowed in for weeks, and you sit there going, oh, man, if you're the pagan thousands of years ago, you're busy. You're hunting, you're gathering, you're doing some farming. You're occupied all the time. And in the winter, you're not. You sit there with your thoughts. And, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. These concepts are not new. They've been played out again and again. So Krampus comes around. He's December 5th. And he's so prominent, so popular, arguably more popular at a few points in time and in a few locations than St. Nicholas. He's more interesting. He never went away. He never went away. But boy, by the early 19-teens, 1920s, he's pushed way down to kind of a footnote. Now, as I'm sure you're aware, and we talked offline before, there's a Krampus movie that just came out about a week ago. And I know both of us saw it, which makes it kind of gives me hope that he's coming back, because we need.
Well, I don't think there's any question to that. I remember the first time I heard about Krampus was on our show, Darkness Radio, about 3 years ago, when you came out. You were very excited talking to me about this character. I said, we need to chat about this, and you came on and kind of enlightened everybody. And then slowly, I've noticed there's been some direct-to-DVD movies about Krampus. There's been a lot more attention given. Now there's even ugly Christmas sweaters made with Krampus. I think we've got a photograph of you wearing a Krampus sweater on Coast to Coast AM.
You do. I did send that in. I'm very proud of that sweater. It is.
I have a question from one of the listeners. Brad Blair wants to know, you mentioned the coal and sticks. Now, as we're talking about the monsters, we're talking about kind of the punishment of these things. Do you know where that legend came from? I was always under the assumption that was part of actually a good gift, because it was helped to give you, something to burn, to have light or heat in your home.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. At a time of darkness and things like that, it would be a gift, depending on who you were. You might be like, yeah, forget candy. I'd rather be warm for a day. No, absolutely. Yeah,
did that only turn around? Yeah, did that turn around and get bad press when other kids were getting toys? And they realized, hey, I can't play with coal, so that kind of became the negative of a Christmas present?
Much more modern. We're talking, the 1920s, 30s, and 40s when that starts to come around, because it's not the idea of gift giving and commercialism became a lot more popular. And that's where I'd like to go next. I want to kind of finish the Santa story.
Sure.
Before we jump into some of the other monsters, and there are a bunch that we can get to.
So we've got about 3.5, 4 minutes left in this segment. So fill us in on Santa Claus.
Perfect. We'll finish Santa Claus and then come back with more monsters. So Santa Claus starts to make his way over to America, and in the mid 1800s, late 1800s, he starts going through some quick evolution. A visit from St. Nicholas, which was the night before Christmas, and all through the house, where we start to define that he's got reindeer. He flies through the sky. He visits the house. He comes down through the chimney. So the narrative of Santa Claus starts to get more defined at that point. And then it was really the Coca-Cola company in the 1920s and 30s that used him as for product placement, used him to sell Coca-Cola and defined him as this big jolly man. And he's going through an evolution from this little old troll-like man creature to this jolly fat man in a red suit with white trim and so forth. And at that point, he becomes really just a force for good. Krampus is going away. All the other consequences of the holiday are going away. Commercialism becomes a very big part of it, and Santa Claus now is the central figure for Christmas. And December 25th becomes his day in America. That goes all the way back to Rome. And of course, there were various scholars that made predictions that the stars would have aligned at that time of year. In Russia, it's January 6th, and so forth. But December 25th is what takes hold in America, and it becomes so closely associated with Santa Claus. He's arguably one of the most recognizable characters in the world. You can show that fat man in a red suit anywhere in the world. People will say, that is Santa Claus. So it's the 1930s. That's the defining moment when we start pushing the monsters away, we start celebrating just the good side of it, and we lose our consequences. And even the ghost stories only hang in there another couple of decades before they go away. We've lost our way. We must get it back. And after the break, we've got to talk about some of the monsters that are going to help us do it.
You've got the case of the sanitization, if you will, of Christmas. And I watch their friends, I watch my kids, and consequences don't really seem to play as big a part today in children's lives as they did, say, when I was a kid. And all of a sudden, there's this rise in popularity of this character, Krampus, again. It's almost like this, you know what? It's time to start putting the fear back into people. It's time to start trying to regain the control, which is what I find so fascinating about so many of the holidays and so many of the folklore and fables and stories that we grew up with, that most of them were ways to control people, keep them from doing something stupid, dangerous, or try to control their attitudes and personalities and misbehavior.
You're absolutely right. And the thing is, these stories, even like the old Grimm tales that were turned into pretty much every Disney movie you've ever seen, they were a lot darker back then. And kids can handle it. That's the thing. Psychologist Bruno Bettelheim wrote a book called The Power of Enchantment that talks about how kids can understand, that we're the darker stuff. You don't need to water it down to the point. In the original Cinderella story, the stepsisters cut their toes off to try to get into the glass slipper. They didn't just push and go, ouch, ouch, ouch. Cut their toes off. They cut their heels off, filled it with blood. That's the original story, and we've turned it into just these hideous stepsisters trying to squeeze into a shoe and not quite getting it. It's a metaphor for how everything is gone from the 1800s to modern day. But we can get it back, and these nightmare creatures have their place. They have their place, and they can serve us, and they can serve us well if we know how to use them.
It's time to start scaring our children again, America.
Right? No one's perfect. We all know we could be better, but can we be redeemed? Can we be saved? And I think we can be saved. And I'm not talking religiously saved or otherwise. I'm just talking morally, and that's one of the promises of this time of year. And so the movie of Dancing Around It, I guess, I really liked it, but again, only because this character was in it. As a movie itself, I can see how horror movie fans would probably feel like it fell short. And if that's your first introduction, yeah, I guess probably around 3 out of 5 stars is where I would sit to.
You talk about the fact of redemption. What are we looking for? It brings me back to a few years ago. My daughter, Pacey, had written her letter to Santa and asked me to mail it. And, of course, being a good father, I just wanted to check the list before I put it in the mail to Santa. And what I thought was absolutely brilliant and just warmed to the cockles of my heart was that my daughter incorporated this huge list of items that she wanted, but only circled 3 of them. and in her letter to Santa it said, listen, I know I've been kind of naughty this year, so I've only circled the 3 that I actually want. And I thought that was a great way to set up the negotiation with Santa. Look, I obviously want a lot of things, but let's just focus on these 3 because I maybe wasn't the best I could have been. When we come back, we're going to talk about other creepy critters. Hunter is with us, and we've been talking about the legend and lore of Christmas. And now more of the dark side, more of the creepy critters that have been associated with this holiday that many of us didn't know exist. As I said, Jeff, I mean, I thought I was pretty up on the holidays. I'd never heard of Krampus until about 3 years ago. And are you finding that that's pretty much the case for most people? They have no idea about this legend until within the last 3 to 5 years?
Absolutely. You know, the last 2 years, I've put a Facebook post about Krampus. You know, it showed some of the old postcards and a little bit of the history, and it got shared quite a bit. You know, this year's post was seen by 150,000 people in a day. You know, and it was really it was eye-opening to see that people are interested. People want to know more about this character, and there's books that are out there. There's a great website about Krampus. So I feel like we're drawn to this character for very primal reasons. You know, something about it makes sense. And that's why that we're bringing it back. All of these traditions, they go back many generations, thousands of years in some cases, and we intertwine them into our modern lives, but we don't even fully understand why. When you do understand why, they mean so much more. So I think we're trying to add to Christmas here tonight, not take away from it, not try to scare you per se, but add to it. So we talked about Krampus. There's a lot more monsters to get to. I'm afraid we're going to run out of time. So. As St. Nicholas comes over to America and starts to really, turn this holiday into more of a, kind of a kinder, gentler Christmas, there's another character from Germany that comes over with him. He's the Belschnickel. And the Belschnickel is still popular in Pennsylvania Dutch country. He is a man, not so much a monster, but he's a man dressed entirely in furs, and he carries a sack that's filled with candy and treats, but he's also carrying a stick or a switch in his hand. And what he does is, in some versions of the story, he'll show up at the house, and he'll throw some candy on the floor. And if any kids die for the candy without being offered, he beats them with the stick. Or parents will say, this child's been naughty, and the Belschnickel will take the kid outside, tie him to a tree, and beat him to a stick. So this is an enforcer. He shows up anywhere between 1 and 2 weeks before Christmas. He is a kind of an enforcer, so he can get the kids flying straight by Christmas Day. So Santa is free to bring him presents and toys and so forth.
Well, that legend would scare anybody that likes piñatas, wouldn't it? Candy hitting around, and if you died for it, you're going to get beaten. That would add a whole new element to birthday parties.
That's right. Absolutely. So this character, what's interesting about him is he's making a comeback, too. In the show The Office, the very popular show The Office, there's an episode where you see Dwight Schrute all dressed up as the Belschnickel, carrying the stick and a whip and covered in furs. And so it's interesting to me that made it into pop culture. I'm actually, I do a show for PBS called New England Legends. On Monday, we're going to be filming at a historic place in Connecticut that is having a Belschnickel event this week. They're not bringing in Santa Claus. They decided for the second year in a row now to bring in the Belschnickel. So I'm seeing this tide turn, right? People are bringing in this character. Now, it's funny. This is a historic home and museum, and I had already asked the curator. I said, so you're bringing in the Belschnickel, and for the second year, I said, are you beating the children? And she laughed and she said, no, our Belschnickel just delivers the candy, not so much beating the children. We didn't think that would be good for a fundraiser.
Oh, shenanigans.
Yeah, it's funny when they stop just short, but I still love the fact that they're using this Yuletide creature, this Yuletide man, forgive me, man, this is not a creature, Yuletide man to kind of further the holiday. And it's an opportunity to talk about what the Belschnickel was like before. Now, this character, Krampus Belschnickel, might sound familiar to our friends in the Netherlands and in Holland. They have a character they call Black Peter. And Black Peter is actually making international news the last couple of years. The story of Black Peter is he's a Moor. He's a dark-skinned person that Santa rescued as a child. And this character, Black Peter, went on to become Santa's servant, really his slave. and he's still depicted in modern-day St. Nicholas parades over in Holland, but he's mostly depicted as a white guy dressed in blackface. Now this is I know you're thinking that sounds very racist, and it sounds very racist to the folks over there as well. There were huge protests in 2014 over in Holland, as people are saying, like, we got to do away with this Black Peter character because it's it is horribly racist. Black Peter would go along and with St. Nicholas, and he was, he could help hand out toys and candy as well, but he could also administer punishment if a kid wasn't good. So again, not to the level of a Krampus or a Belschnickel, but he might be there to spank the kids or pull them away, from St. Nicholas if they were naughty. So this character sounds familiar, right? These same kind of things. And you have to realize, a few centuries ago, the idea of someone owning a slave was very common. But by today's standard, we don't like it. And so it's interesting to watch, mainstream news following the saga of Black Peter because he's going away. He's going away because it disagrees with our modern sensibilities. I'm not saying it's wrong that he's going away. Maybe he should. Maybe it's time to retire that legend because it reminds us of a horrible time when people could be slaves. And then you start saying, like, yeah, that'd be ridiculous for Santa Claus to have slaves. He's a jolly figure. He would never have slaves. Never, ever have slaves. The elves, Dave. The elves. What are the elves? Oh, no.
No, they were just out-of-work migrant workers that were hanging out at the North Pole with nothing better to do. Santa gave them a job.
That's right. So anyway, the idea of slave labor in Santa Claus surface. But yeah, so there's these characters show up again and again. Now, the next stop I want to go is to Sweden. And with Sweden, we've got a different kind of figure, one that actually is probably on a lot of people's shelves, or at least a version of it. He's called the Tomten. And the Tomten is a house spirit. And he can be kind and mischievous, but he can also be mischievous or cruel. He's there to help. And you need the Tomten. The Tomten can look after the animals in the barn. The Tomten can help run the household. But if the humans get neglectful or mean with the animals or neglectful of their house chores, the Tomten's been known to act up, even to the point of, beating the people of the house. And he asks for one thing, Dave, only one thing. He asks for sweet rice pudding, a bowl of it, to be left out for him on Christmas Eve night. That's it. That's all he asks. Behave, be good, and leave me a food offering on Christmas Eve, and I will stick around. The worst thing the Tomten can do is not beat you, but leave you. That would be the worst thing to happen, is that he gives up. You didn't leave me the pudding, you're not acting right, I'm out of here. And you're on your own. You don't have the house spirit anymore. He's depicted as this really miniature, magical old man. Big white beard, large red pointy hat. Kind of all beard and all hat.
Like a garden gnome.
Exactly like a garden gnome. That's exactly what he looks like. If you, my mother has got all these little Santa figures that she puts out every Christmas. She puts them up on a shelf, and there's one that I looked at just a few weeks ago. I remember looking and saying, "That's the Tomten." That's not, it's this little tiny miniature gnome-like guy, big white beard, long red pointy hat. That's the Tomten. And so you make this special rice, sweet rice pudding. It's just water, short grain rice, whole milk, butter, salt, sugar, and cinnamon. And you leave a pat of butter on top of the bowl. You sprinkle it with some cinnamon. You leave that bowl out for the Tomten, and he will come and get it on Christmas Eve night. And you say that harkens back to pagan times, of course, right? Leaving a food offering out for magical creatures.
Sure.
That sounds very pagan. I mean, who would ever do that in a Christmas tradition? Leave out a food offering. I mean,
that's right. That's ridiculous.
Wait a minute, Dave. Wait a minute. Do you leave cookies and milk out too?
Yes, I do.
Man.
He's got a lot to do. He needs his energy, Jeff.
I know, so we've been leaving food offerings out. We never even thought about it. We've been doing that for years and years. My daughter even leaves out carrots for the reindeer.
Well, they need food too. It's a lot of energy flying all that night.
Of course it is. So this, again, it's a tradition that we're doing. And so this little, magical creature, this Tomten, he's keeping tabs. He's sneaking around, he's helping around the house, and he's keeping tabs. Does that sound at all familiar, Dave? Does it sound like maybe some kind of elf on the shelf?
Oh, sure. Only a little less creepy, right?
Oh, right. The elf on the shelf doesn't beat you and it doesn't ask for anything, really. Just don't touch the elf on the shelf.
That's right.
And the elf on the shelf, and so we do the elf on the shelf tradition at my house, and tradition doesn't go back that far. It's only, 10, 12 years old. And so we do it, and we have a lot of great fun with it. But I thought, this year I'm going to up the ante. We do the elf on the shelf, but I also have Krampus in the corner.
And how does that go in the household? You've got a child. Is that real well loved at home?
It's a 6-foot tall statue that I just move around from corner of the house to corner of the house.
Please tell me there's red glowing eyes in a fog machine just so you can really make her think twice.
Costs about $3,000.
But there's 364 days a year where your kid is really good, right?
Really good. $3,000 is money well spent for Krampus in the corner. I kid. There's no such product yet. Although I bet someone out there right now is running into their workshop and getting to it.
Brought to you by George Norrie. You keep watching. We're going to get one for Krampus in the corner. George, let's get on that.
It would be amazing. I do have a Krampus Christmas ornament hanging on my tree, though, so it's a start.
I know the TV show Grimm actually had a Krampus episode recently, I guess. The Krampus is making a comeback, too, with many different versions of the story popping up. But these other characters, like you said, Black Peter's kind of resurging, the Belschnickel in some parts of the country, they're kind of glorifying these different characters. Are they giving the history to let people know what these characters really were, or are they even still sanitizing it now?
Of course it's being sanitized. You can't have especially a fundraiser, you can't beat children, but I think you can tell them the story that, I'm the enforcer. I'm the guy that's here to check on your behavior. And the beautiful thing, like, okay, this historic home we're going to on Monday, their Belschnickel event takes place this week, which is still, just shy of 2 weeks, which is exactly when the Belschnickel shows up. And he's there to tell the story that I'm here to make sure you're good. You still have time to behave and get right before St. Nicholas comes on December 25th. And so that is really following in the tradition. No, he's not going to beat any kids, of course, but there's the threat. There's the idea that, there are enforcers out there. And I think it's great that we bring them back because, like we said earlier, where's the consequence? Where's the consequence? Now, there's a couple other quick monsters I want to talk about before because we're going to run out of time. There's so much to talk about. In Bulgaria, they've got a nightmarish creature, a Bigfoot-type creature they call the Krampuslauf. Around, but on December 24th, on Christmas Eve, he shows up and he's a shapeshifter. He's described as very much like a Bigfoot type of creature, but maybe a little more hideous. And he shows up and he hides around street corners and surprises passersby, and he asks them a riddle. And if the word black is not incorporated into the answer to the riddle, he hits you with a death blow and crushes your skull. You're dead. And I know what you're thinking, Dave. I'm just going to stay inside. At this point, you're probably staying inside all of Christmas anyway. You're thinking, it's too scary out there. That's fine. It won't help you. The Krampuslauf will shapeshift into like a little girl and ask for help and stand outside your door until you come outside and say, little girl, there's monsters lurking. You can't be out here. And you come outside and then shapeshifts back into this Bigfoot creature. And then, of course, it's too late. You're about to get asked a riddle. Make sure the word black is in the answer to your riddle, and you stand at least a chance of surviving.
Really?
That's the hope.
That's the hope. Such bizarre legends. I mean, do we have an idea of where these come from? I mean, why does it take this aspect? Why is it riddles? Why is it, these different angles that each one brings to the story?
I think because all of these monsters tap into something very primal with us. It harkens back to a time where we believed monsters and demons and all these other things lurk the earth with us. And maybe they still do. Maybe they do under, different forms. There's horrible people out there doing things that you would call demonic. They're human beings, but they're doing despicable acts. And so the idea makes sense that there are these carnal entities, and so the stories, we share them because it helps us tap into those things. It helps us tap into the darker side because you say, like, I don't want those things around. But knowing they're there might help keep my moral compass in check just a tiny little bit. Just a tiny bit. And there's one other story I've got to tell you about, Dave, from Iceland.
Well, why don't we do this? We're up against the break. We'll come back. We'll hear about this other creepy creature from Iceland. Our guest this evening, Jeff Belanger.